Welcome, my friends, to our PMP Exam Masterclass for today. I know lots of you have been getting ready for the test, but you've never been in a live class. So this is your opportunity to be in a live class with me. I'm going to cover a lot of content for you today, but we're going to start off talking about the PMP exam. So let's jump into it. So welcome, my name is Phil Akinwale. I'll be taking you through the PMP exam syllabus at a high level. Lots of you have been getting ready for this exam, but you've never been in a live class. So this is as good as it's going to get for some of you, right? Some of you have been in these online trainings where you just see a lot of PowerPoints, but it's not really dynamic. So this is our chance to go deep into the content, okay? So when we think about the PMP exam, you got to understand that this exam is broken down into three big buckets. The buckets: people, process, and business. When you think about each of these domains, you got to understand the skin in the game. You should have a lot of skin in the game of process because this is 50% of your exam, right? People is 42% of your exam, and business is 8% of the exam. Now, you may ask, but Phil, what do all these mean? What do you mean by process? What do you mean by people? What do you mean by business? So let's break it down real quick. When you think about the people domain, this is very soft skills heavy. Soft skills. This is very leadership driven, very communications driven, right? Very EI driven, emotional intelligence, very collaboration driven, all right? That's why we say people. The people domain has a few themes at the center that I really want you to be aware of. And the first theme is leadership, because the true measure of leadership is influence, as John Maxwell says. And if you want to lead, you got to be good with people. If you're not good with people, you got almost zero chance of leading. You got to be good with people. So the people domain is going to test you on the philosophies that are similar to what is in the Agile Manifesto. You know, the Agile Manifesto says, through this work, we've come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, right? Working product over comprehensive documentation. But then he goes to say customer collaboration over contract negotiation. You see where this is going? It's people driven. And then when you take a look at the principles, the very first principle says our highest priority is to satisfy the customer. The customer. The customer is a person. So this is very human driven. I'll say it's very humanistic. All right? Very, you could say it's stakeholder focused. Stakeholder focused. And you could also say team focused. Team focus. Okay? For that reason, before you exam, there are a number of things that I need you to be really solid on. So first and foremost, you got to understand how leadership works. And to understand how leadership works, I would encourage you to read the Hersy Blanchard model. The Blanchard model and the Hersy model, same model, but different namings. The one I need you to focus on is the Ken Blanchard model. Now, when you focus on that model, what you're going to see, just to give you a reminder if you've forgotten, when you take a look at the Hersy Blanchard model, you got these quadrants, right? and you got these axes. This is your level of directing if you are a manager, for example. If you're a manager of people, this is the level that you direct people, very directing, and this is the level over here at which you support. So if you have a lot of directing but very little support, this is a directing style, right? If you have a whole lot of directing and a whole lot of supporting, this is a coaching style. If you have a whole lot of support but very little directing, we call this a supporting leadership style. Supportive, you could also call it participating. And then down here, if you have very little support and very little directing, this is where you delegate. You might have heard the term laissez-faire. Well, this is where it happens. So as you go into your exam, you got to remember that, and you got to understand that not everybody is managed the same way. Not everyone is led the same way. So we got to be able to be flexible in our leadership approach. Okay? And always think servant leadership. You should also spend some time studying the 10 tenets of servant leadership. Okay? These are all concepts that are going to help you in the long run as you take the PMP exam. Another concept that could help you on the PMP exam when it comes to the people domain is the 5 stages of team development: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. You got to understand the dynamic. Where do people have conflict the most? Storming, right? Where do people act like they're all cute and they're all good and they could never do anything bad? Forming. Where do we say we would rather not go in the world of Agile? Adjourning. We would rather not disband the team. When it comes to performing, this is where the team is functioning as a well-oiled unit. This is where you want to get the team to. Sometimes you might need to be a little bit more directive to get the team to participate in, but as you begin to get to normalizing, right, norming, you can begin to take your foot off the directing gas and let the team figure things out a little bit more. Okay, so the 5 stages of team development is also big topic in the people domain. Another topic you need to be aware of in the people domain is the stages of conflict, and we call that the Thomas Kalman conflict mode instrument. Have you heard of that? I bet you have. You just don't know it's called that. You see, the Thomas Kalman conflict mode instrument, we have the 5 approaches to resolving conflict. Let's see if you can remember them. Do you remember? I'll give you a little time to think. Okay, I'm going to write them here. A is for avoid. You can avoid or you can withdraw. Avoid, you can also withdraw. Okay? What next? Smooth, S for smooth. What is another name for smooth? Apart from smooth, we can call it something beginning with the letter A. I've given it away. Smooth or accommodate. All right. Next one. Let's see if you can give me one more. Give me one beginning with C. Okay, you probably came up with 2. Well, I was looking for C for avoid, withdraw, smooth, accommodate. Compromise is the one. Compromise, also known as, do you remember that one? Compromise, also known as reconcile. Ah, some of you have forgotten this. What is the other one beginning with the letter C? Collaborate. Collaborate, also known as beginning with letter S or beginning with letter P, problem solve. Okay, what's the final one that we would rather not go down? Used in an emergency to resolve a conflict. Okay, the last one is false or direct. See that? False or direct. So for your exam, there are many topics under the people domain that you have to get down pat. And then when it comes to the philosophies, you got to get those philosophies down, my friend. Okay? So you got to think about it. Compromise, reconcile, force, direct. When should I use those? When do I use collaborate? When do I walk away? So you got to be able to take all these concepts, the Hersy Blanchard model, the 5 stages of team development, the 10 tenets of servant leadership, not to mention other leadership principles and ideas and thoughts like Maslow's pyramid. People sing lullabies every Sunday. Physiological safety, love or belonging. People sing lullabies every esteem and the pinnacle self-actualization. This is all stuff that you gotta have them down pat, my friends. Because when you come across questions that are trying to test the knowledge or the philosophy in leadership, you got to have these down, my friend. Okay? What about McGregor's theory of X and Y? You got a theory X leader, theory Y. Theory X, arms folded, tight, always micromanaging. And then you got the Y leader with open arms, believing the best in you, right? The X leader is an impediment to your morale, whereas the Y, theory Y leader is liberated. And just understanding those philosophies, because if the questions pose which one would you rather be, right? Makes sense to be a leader that inspires and motivates and encourages. You know, the philosophy is very similar to something Steve Jobs said. Steve Jobs said, management is making people do what you want them to do. But leadership is helping people to see the possibilities, helping people to do the things they never thought they could. You see, it's a philosophy. Which one are you going to be? The leader with carrot and sticks, whacking the people over the head, kicking them around? Or are you going to be the more theory Y leader that inspires, that motivates, that encourages? You see, a lot of the questions on the PMP exam, they are going to come from a mix of agile and hybrid. So when you're thinking of the exam, it's important that you don't just, hyper focus on process and PMBOK. That's good. PMBOK is good, but a lot of your questions could end up coming from an agile perspective, which is why I would encourage you to know the values, the overarching values in the Agile Manifesto and the overarching principles. Let me share a few of my favorites. So when it comes to the Agile values, manifesto values, you got to be quite familiar with them. So it says through this work, it says we are uncovering better ways of developing product by doing it and helping others do it. And through this work, we've come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Value work in product over comprehensive documentation. Value customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Value responding to change over following a plan. See? So when you put all of these together, it is a very humanistic, value-focused set of ideas in the values. Now, when you talk about the principles, some of my favorites, number one, our highest priority is to satisfy the customer. How? Through early and continuous delivery of valuable products. Why do you want to deliver early and continuously? Because the earlier you deliver in the world of Agile, the better it is for you as a development team. You're going to get feedback. You're going to put the feedback back into what you're doing. You're going to get a better product overall. We say fail often, fail fast, fail forward, All those philosophies are helpful to understand why you do what you do in Agile. So our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable product. Think about that. Value. What is value? Well, value is the net benefit of whatever you deliver to the customer. If the customer doesn't have an advantage or is not able to find something in it for them, then there's not going to be any value. But when there are many benefits that the customer realizes from a product, then we're talking value, because value is the net benefit. So these philosophies, you got to have them even in the people domain. You got to understand that with the customers, even late in development, you got to harness change. You see, it says another Agile manifesto principle says you got to welcome changes even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. You see that? So your mindset needs to be one of customer, 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 value, customer, customer. Another principle I quite like says, build projects around motivated individuals. Now it seems like obvious, but do you know there are a lot of companies, they don't build around motivated individuals, they build around skill. And while skill is important, you need that motivation as well, because if you don't have motivated individuals, they're not going to be able to self-inspire. And it could end up being an impediment to the company and the team's morale. So you want people who are motivated. It says build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and support they need. Trust them to get the job done. Wow. Trust. It's such a thing. And questions will test you on these philosophies. You see. My final one, number 12 in the Agile Manifesto principles, just says at regular intervals, the team, they step back, they reflect, and they see what can we do better. They adjust their process as a team. All right, so my friends, that was the very first domain. Right now, we are going to have a little break before we go into the people domain, the process domain, I beg your pardon. People domain, we're going into the process domain next, and eventually we'll get to the business domain. So you're about 42% of the way there. All right, so I'll see you when we come back, and we'll continue our journey.